Good evening. I'll make one correction to the introduction that David made. We are currently living in Cambridge, but I'm sure my children would much rather it be Manchester, for they have two teams in the Premier League, where our local side is in lowly League Two. And if you are not familiar with the intricacies of English football, you can ask my two children and they will inform you fluently on it because they spend their days studying up on that sort of thing. First of all, I'd like to thank David for this invitation to speak to you. I'd like to thank the elders for the foresight that they have in supporting the School of Preaching here. And I would commend to you the School of Preaching and the great and wonderful work that it is. It is one of the things that Melissa and I both look forward to when we return to the States, to be able to re-enroll, to get back into the School of Preaching and to have that enrich our lives in the way that it does. And if you are currently in the school, then you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, then I would encourage you to take a class next time that it's available to you. Right, so by way of introduction and just to kind of let you know what our situation is, and that'll inform the lesson that I'm about to bring to you. A few years ago, in 2013, Melissa and I, our family, moved to Cambridge for a temporary job assignment. And we've been there since, and we enjoy it immensely. We love living there, but we miss you guys. We miss our family here in the States, and we're able to communicate on Skype, and that's great. But it's just not the same as being there. It's not the same as putting your hands on your grandbabies. My family and Melissa's family are eager for us to leave you guys and get down there to see them. But for us, it's an opportunity for us to go and live in a culture that's different. Not so different from our own, but it's a little different. Everything. They say things a little different. They use different words for different things, and they drive on the opposite side of the street. And I caught myself today, and Terry and Kathy took us to show us where they're building a house, and I was leaving there, and I was on the wrong side. I was like, thankfully, it's a very quiet neighborhood at the minute since they're just building homes, that sort of thing. But it's everything's just a little off. It's just a little different, and by way of our study this evening, that's kind of the point that I want to pick up on. Shouldn't that be the way that we as Christians feel living here on the earth now? Shouldn't we look around and go, wait, things are a bit off. Things are a bit wrong. I wish I was back home. I wish I was in heaven, where things will be right. Things will be perfect. And that's what I want to pick up on this evening. In Exodus 2 and verse 22, on the naming of his son, Moses named him Gershom, and he said, because I was a stranger in a foreign land. And if you have margin notes in your Bible like my Bible has, it made a note on that word stranger. It called it a sojourner, a traveler, a temporary resident. And that's what we are. That's what we are in Cambridge. We're temporary residents. And I know that our situation doesn't really apply to everyone, but if we think about it, we've all lived through temporary situations. I think the one that most parallels our situation is a military posting. I work with members of the Royal Air Force in Cambridge, and they are constantly in and out of postings, getting sent here and there all over the world, all over the UK. And They go to their assignment. They work diligently there, but that's not their home. That's not where they call home. That's not where their family is. It's just where they've been posted to. So that's probably the one that matches most closely to our situation. But there's loads of others that you can think of. There's taking a temporary job while you're searching for that career that you're looking forward to. Living in an apartment while you're building a house. Or any number of other situations that we might find ourselves in where we think, wait a minute, I'm a stranger here. This isn't what I want for my life. This isn't what I want the permanent situation to be. So as we think about it, we as Christians should feel like strangers in a foreign land. Jesus in John 17 prayed for his disciples, and he prayed that they would be in the world but not of the world. And that's what I want to get through to us. That's what I want us to think about. That we're going to find ourselves in whatever situation we are in, but we don't have to be molded by that. We don't have to be captured by it. We can be Christians, and we can do as God would have us to do in whatever situation that we found ourselves. And then if you also think about in Philippians 1, verses 21 through 24, Paul there was struggling to come to grips with his desire to go home, to go to heaven and be with Christ, versus his desire to stay and strengthen the brethren, to be there such that he could be of help. He knew what help he could provide, and he knew that if he were to finish his race, that help would end physically, with his presence being there with them, and he struggled with that. And I want us to think tonight, as in our situation where our desire is to come back to America, but there's a struggling congregation in Cambridge that is small in number, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but we're a big help there in that congregation, and that's a difficulty. That's something that we don't want to give up. We don't want them to lose the help that we can be. And for all of us, really, we need to realize that desire to go to heaven versus the desire to stay here and continue on in life and helping our families, helping our brethren, that's going to be a difficult path for all of us to go down, but it's a motivating factor for us to try to make the situation that we're in as heaven-like as possible. Try to do the things in this life that will make it such that when we transition into heaven, it's not that big of a change for us. Hopefully, we can do that. Hopefully, we can have enough control over the situations that we find ourselves in to know that we're making a difference, to know that we're doing things that are helping. And so, as we move through this, this is going to turn into a bit of a holiday snaps slideshow type thing, but I want us to realize, and I want us to focus on the illustration that the things of this world, the things of man's creation, pale in comparison to the things that God has for us, the things that God has created. So, as we move forward, we'll look at a few slides from Cambridge. Cambridge is a beautiful city. It's lovely to live there. It's just picturesque. You'll see some of these. And as we look at these and we think, wow, yeah, I would like to live there. That's nice. That's how we feel. We enjoy living there, but is it something to keep us in place? Is it something to remove our desire to come back home? No. These things don't, these images and things from around Cambridge, they don't make us want to stay because we know that we've got family here. We've got friends here. And what we want to do is come back. So as you're trying to think, well, how does that apply to me? Well, when you find yourself thinking, my life is going poorly. The things that I want aren't coming around for me. We can think, well, heaven is set aside for me, and if I'm headed that direction, then the things here, even the nice things, even the good things that are here on earth, are going to pale in comparison to what we have waiting for us as we find our home in heaven. I think there's one more. Yeah, that's my favorite one. That is my favorite spot in all of Cambridge. And it's even better now because they repaved that path. And so cycling down it is not such a rattle your teeth out of your head type thing. You can't really see it on that, but when that picture was taken, that path was pretty rough. But those trees are hundreds of years old, and it's magnificent to just walk down that or cycle down it or whatever. But is it worth staying? Is it worth? Is it something that'll hold us? So, as we move through some of the rest of this, we want to think about. I'm going to show you several slides on man's creations, and I'll give credit to the photographer here. These are all Melissa's pictures, save one. I won't give it away, but I think it'll be obvious which one is one of mine. But as we look through these, as we think about the works of man, some of these are the works of geniuses, and some of them are other things that we'll just move through it. I don't know who built Stonehenge, but the builders and the workers that did it, I don't know if we can call them geniuses, but they put a lot of work into it to move those stones to the middle of nowhere. I'm telling you, the middle of nowhere. There are no stones like that anywhere in Wiltshire. Those stones came from Wales, and it's a long, long way away. But the work that they put in, that's what I want us to think about as we move through these. Let's have a feel for the level of effort that man puts into his creations, because in a minute we're going to have a look at some of God's creations and we'll see the difference. This is the Rosetta Stone. If you know anything about the Rosetta Stone, then I'm sorry for rehashing it, but the Rosetta Stone was the thing that unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs for mankind. Before the discovery of this stone, we didn't know, scholars had no idea what Egyptians' hieroglyphs were talking about. There was no translation for them. When this stone was found, it's listed there. The top section is the hieroglyphs. The middle part, the middle text there is an Egyptian language, and then the bottom part is ancient Greek, which was well known to scholars. So when they found this, they were able to compare. They were able to make a translation of the hieroglyphs. And so just as an aside for this one, just a small point that this brings out. This wasn't a work of genius, the Rosetta Stone here. The thing that's written there is a decree when Ptolemy V became king of Egypt. It's a decree that says, I'm the king, I'm a god, you'll worship me and you'll obey what I say, and these are my laws and that sort of thing. That's what this was. This was a legal document. It was kind of posted on the town center to say, here's the new king. And it was written in these languages. But we can think about the insignificance, this is a mundane item when it was first made. When it was first made, the only purpose behind it was to proclaim a new king. It was like a billboard to say, this guy's the new king. So a bit of a mundane item. But now it's priceless. It's invaluable to the work of scholars in this area. So the point that I wanted to make here with this little tangent was that the things that we do in life may seem insignificant to us, but let's think about the effect that they may have on those around us. If we have a kind word to say to somebody, maybe that's just what they needed that day. Maybe their day was going poorly, and a kind word from us really turned it around. How much did that cost us? How much effort did we make? How much time out of our day did that kind word cost? Not much, I would say. But how much benefit was it to them? That, I think, is a good point that we can illustrate with the Rosetta Stone here, was that the people that wrote that had no idea the impact that they were going to make hundreds and hundreds of years later on the advancement of scholarship. I'm not going to say something about each of these. We'll be here all night, but I'll move through them quickly. This is Notre Dame. This is the Ponte Vecchio in Florence. It's you may not be able to tell from the picture, but it's a bridge there, and they've built these shops onto the side of it, and it's strange to walk on it and see them all, and they're very precarious. They've got these old wooden beams holding them up and all this sort of thing. And I think to myself, I don't think that I'd want to pay the rent for my shop to be there hanging off the side of this bridge. But it's a very famous landmark there. You may say that the Leaning Tower in Pisa is not the work of a genius because of what happened to it. But when we think about it, they were doing the best with what they had. And when they realized that it started leaning, they started building it differently. It's hard to see in the photo, but for the first kind of 8 or 9 levels, it's all fairly straight. Starting about level 10 or 11, they start making the columns on one side a little longer to try to straighten it back up. But they were working within their means. They were doing the best with what they had. That's arguably the most famous painting in the world. If you've ever gone and seen it, you'll be struck by the size of it. It's about yay big. You'd think the most famous painting in the world would be gigantic, but it's not. It's fairly small, and you have to muscle your way up if you want to get even a picture like that with no heads or arms or selfie sticks or whatever stuck in it. But Big Ben's in London. Big Ben is the bell. It's not the tower. Big Ben is the bell that's inside the tower that you hear when the chime goes. The Eiffel Tower was indeed a work of genius. When Gustave Eiffel proposed it, they called him crazy. They said it'll never work. They said, you're trying to build this thing out of bridge girders and rivets. What are you doing? We build towers out of masonry. If they tried to build, I watched a program on the Eiffel Tower, and if you try to build a masonry tower that tall, there's no way. It won't stand. The foundations won't hold it up. But he had faith in his system, and he went for it. And it's still there today. It was supposed to last 6 months. It was a World's Fair exhibit. It's like the arch in St. Louis, World's Fair exhibit. It was supposed to last 6 months, and then they were going to tear it down. But the Parisians liked it, so they kept it, and so we get to marvel at it even today. That's the Tower Bridge in London. That might be mine. Oh, I said I wasn't going to give you a clue. I'm sorry. That's the SR-71 Blackbird. That still holds the record for the fastest air-breathing airplane ever built. And it was built in, 1964? Is that what it says there? It's a work of utter genius. And my wife's favorite, the Guggenheim in Bilbao, again, a work of utter genius. Frank Gehry was inspired with this thing. There's not a straight line in it. It's one of those that, an architect's dream, a builder's nightmare, that sort of thing. How you can draw that on paper, no problem, but how are you going to build it with physical material? But it's built, and it's fantastic to go and look at. But what is it really? All these works of genius? Turn in your Bible to Isaiah chapter 44. I would submit to you that these things, if we attach to them the wrong level of significance, become idolatry. They become vanity. And we all know the utter foolishness of idolatry. If you look, starting in verse 15 there of Isaiah 44, then it shall be for a man to burn. I've skipped over the bit about where he's gone out and cut a tree down and brought in some wood into his house. So for context, that's what we're talking about. Then it shall be for a man to burn, for he will take some of it and warm himself. Yes, he kindles it and bakes bread. Indeed, he makes a god and worships it. He makes it for a carved image and falls down to it. He burns half of it in the fire. With this half he eats meat, he roasts a roast, and is satisfied. He even warms himself and says, I am warm, I have seen the fire. And the rest of it he makes into a god, his carved image. He falls down before it and worships it, prays to it and says, deliver me, for you are my God. What utter foolishness. And we'll continue in a second, but because Isaiah explains himself, but just think about it. Just think about you chop a tree down, you bring a log into your house, you saw that log in half. With half of it, you warm yourself and you bake some bread, and with the other half, you make a god to bow down to and pray to. Well, which half do you choose? Which half was a god? What if you burned the god half? This idolatry says it's foolishness. Let's continue. Look at verse 18. They do not know nor understand, for he has shut their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts so they cannot understand. And no one considers in his heart, nor is there knowledge nor understanding to say, I have burned half of it, and it is half of it in the fire. So now he's saying this is what he should think. This is what the man that's made himself a wooden god and burned the other half, this is what he should think. Yes, I have also baked bread on its coals. I have roasted meat and eaten it. And shall I make the rest of it an abomination? Shall I fall down before a block of wood? He feeds on ashes. A deceived heart has turned him aside, and he cannot deliver his soul, nor say, is there not a lie in my right hand? So if we attach to those things that we just looked at the wrong level of significance, they are awe-inspiring. They are works of genius. I'll submit to you. I don't doubt that. But do they stand? Do they compare to the works of God? Do they compare to the creation of God? Let's see. How does the Eiffel Tower stand up against a flower? If we really take a look, if we really think, right, this is what God has created. This is what God can do when he sets his mind to producing beauty. And think about some of the things, some of the buildings, a few airplanes, a bridge or two that man has created. And imagine what God can do. This one I thought I would pause on because we've switched kind of from flora to now flora and fauna, because if you can see, there's, I think, 3 or 4 bees in that one. Think about the interconnected system that flowers and bees have. And it's one that we learn about in grade school, how the bees pollinate the flowers and make the honey and all that sort of thing. But just think about it. Think about the genius of God. We'll switch now to landscapes. If we try to imagine ourselves as men creating something on this level, on the level of what God has done, if you stand on a mountain and look out and just see what you can see, it's awe-inspiring. There is no creation of man that stands up, that even comes close to what God has put on the earth for us to observe. That's one of the 3 sisters, because we couldn't get far enough away to get the other 2. You can see them there kind of in the sides of the frames to the left and the right. But they're massive. And it's one of those things, how do we stand before that and say, there is no God? This is all happenstance. This is, an amalgamation of comets and meteors coming together and billions of years, and all that. How that story goes. How do we do that? How do we look at God's creation and think, nah, that's happenstance. That's just a collection of random events caused this to happen. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't do that. I can't look at these things and think to myself, yeah, we're on the level with God. So as we come to a close, I'd like to ask ourselves, or I hope that you've been thinking about it as we've gone through and kind of gone through our holiday slideshow type thing. What is it that causes us to understand the nature of God? Or what is it that we are holding on to in this life? Is it the creation of man? Is it the things that we put our faith in? Is it our own understanding? Is it the money that we can make, the job that we can hold, all those sorts of things? I hope not. I hope that as we look at some examples of God's world, God's beauty, that we can find that those are the things that we should put our faith in. We should see those things and turn to God. And if we will do that, He will make it such that we don't have to be a stranger any longer. If you'll look at Ephesians 2, and starting in verse 19, we'll look and see what it is when we build on the chief cornerstone, what God says that we are. Chapter 2, starting in verse 19 there. Now therefore you are no longer strangers or foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, Jesus Christ Himself being the chief cornerstone. So if we find ourselves wrapped up in the things of the world, if we find that our motivation is secular and materialistic, and we find that we are forever reaching for that thing that man says will make us great, then we've got to take a step back. We've got to reevaluate. We've got to realize that God is the one that's made us great. He's the one that has blessed us with an immortal soul, and He's the one that knows how to take care of that soul. If thinking about this tonight has caused you to think, I need to set my life right, then you have that opportunity this evening. If it's the case that you're not a Christian, I would encourage you to become one. All that needs doing is hearing the Word, believing that Word, confessing Christ as the Son of God, repenting of your sins and being baptized. After that is done, then a faithful life is what you have in front of you. If you've done those things, yet you found that for some reason the ways of the world have tempted you away from the ways of God, then God asks you to repent, to pray, to come back. If you have any need tonight, please make that need known as we stand and as we sing.